As we hear horror stories from the Hamas captives who've been freed, President Biden is going back to his old playbook, apparently. He's now in Colorado to hype up Bidenomics, even though they're so woefully unpopular. But he thinks he can make fetch happen. Also expected to get back to his familiar refrain of ripping what he calls extreme MAGA policies. The evidence voters are not buying keeps pouring in, and his approval on key issues such as the economy, the Middle East, and foreign affairs are deeply underwater for him. He also tied his record low approval rating for a third time with just 37%. Republicans say Biden has no one to blame but himself.
The majority of the American people no longer have faith in the American dream.
We've now absolutely emptied our strategic petroleum reserve.
His Bidenomics is failing miserably. His foreign policy is failing miserably. His southern border is failing miserably.
Joe Biden, the president, cannot fix his problem. His number one problem is his age.
The American people, I think, are starting to understand now, looking at the polling, of who's making these decisions, and all these decisions are going against the American people.
Well, maybe most dramatic, Biden's approval with independent voters is at an all-time low of 27%. The New York Times saying this about Biden's weakness with young voters. An excerpt here. Young voters are by far the likeliest to say he's just too old to be an effective president. Many are upset about his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Power panel now. Shermichael Singleton, host of the Shermichael Singleton Show on Sirius XM. Mark Penn, former Clinton advisor and pollster. Great to have you both.
Hi,
First of all, Shermichael, 27% of anything would deem it not effective if you were, taking like aspirin or something. I mean, this is really, really negative for a current president inside now a year from Election Day.
Yeah, it most certainly is. And if you look at most recent elections, Harris, we've never had a president that has performed so poorly with independent voters that went on to win re-election. And so this should signal real problems for the Biden administration as well as Democrats generally speaking. You just cited the state of the economy. You talked about the way the president is handling foreign affairs. And let's also keep in mind, Harris, the immigration problem, where you have many Americans, including Black Americans in cities like New York and Chicago, that are saying, wait a minute here, why are we redirecting resources for Americans to people who aren't U.S. citizens? There's a real problem on the president's hands, and he seems incapable of handling it.
Well, look, Mark, I don't want to lean too hard on his age. I know that one poll of young voters, that's what they would poll to because they're oppositional in that way to the president. And I've been 29 many, many, many times. So let's just focus on this Bidenomics message. Does he think Americans are too stupid to know what they really are experiencing and that he can talk them out of it?
Well, so far he's had little success at that, at convincing people that low inflation, lower inflation that has been coming down, low unemployment is a good economy because the voters have been focusing on the general rise in prices over the last year and a half.
They're still rising. They're just rising slower.
They're rising slower. That's right. So,
but they're
yes,
still rising.
He's been unsuccessful so far at convincing people, but he's got a year. And in a year in economic terms is a really long time if inflation keeps coming down. So I don't expect he's going to move any voters on that today, but he's not going to give up on it. That's for sure.
He has less than a year. It'll be December on Friday. It looks like Vice President Kamala Harris has a new job, Latino voter outreach. She's upping her efforts to connect with those particular voters heading into 2024 as Biden has support, and that slipped. So she's going to try to make up that difference. A recent poll averaging 6 battleground states shows 42% of Hispanic voters in swing states support Trump, compared to 50% for Joe Biden. That's a major drop for President Biden, who saw 65% support in 2020, compared with Trump's 32% then. So what's flipped the switch in this particular voting bloc, Shermichael?
I mean, I think the Latino community, just like the African American community, just like the white American community, the Asian American community, are looking at economic instability and an inaccessible housing market. The reality is, for most Americans, the American dream is really a dream. You'd have to be dreaming to frankly believe it, Harris, because what we expected 25 or 30 years ago in terms of building a nuclear family, putting your kids through college, living in a safe community, that is just not the reality for any American, regardless of your ethnicity or your racial background. And so people are looking for someone else to move the needle forward for them. And I will say this quickly. People may have their criticisms of Donald Trump, and there are many to list, but they look at the state of the economy under Trump, and people are saying, you know what? The economy was booming 4 years ago. It's no longer booming today. Maybe we should give the former president a second opportunity.
All right, let's move to this. The Israel-Hamas war may be exposing a deep rift among members of the far-left Democrats. And yesterday, 6 members of that group voted in favor of 2 pro-Israel resolutions. None of them supported an earlier similar resolution. So maybe the politics, or at least the pressure there is moving. But there were 2 notable divides from the far-left members of the Democrats in yesterday's vote. Congresswoman Cori Bush did not vote at all for either resolution. And we checked with the team. It wasn't that she wasn't available, apparently. Maybe she'll put out a different type of a statement. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib voted in favor of condemning Hamas's attack on Israel, but she did not support a resolution recognizing Israel's right to exist. She explained her present vote in the statement. Israel does not have a right to carry out illegal occupation and apartheid, which will never lead to a just and lasting peace. Unfortunately, this resolution is a one-sided attempt to rewrite history and contributes to the ongoing erasure of Palestinians by not even acknowledging their existence. Mark.
Look, it was 412 to 1 in favor of that resolution. I was heartened by that. It's no surprise to me that 2 members of the squad, in fact, it was a little bit of surprise that it was reduced to 2 members of the squad, came out against a simple resolution recognizing the right of Israel to exist. The one opponent was actually a Republican. But I think we should all take heart that it did pass 412 to 1 and look at the enormous support. And yes, there are a couple of people who don't support it. We know that.
What would you say to Rashida Tlaib right now, Mark?
I'd say I disagree with you. Israel has a right to exist. It's a 75-year-old country, and there's thousands of years of history, and that it's time that, and it's unfortunate that college campuses don't understand what obviously 412 members of Congress do, that this is the Jewish people's homeland, and it has a right to exist.
Shermichael.
Look, it's the only country in that part of the world that truly lives up to our ideals and idealism in terms of a democracy, in terms of freedom, in terms of justice. And right now, we're dealing with various countries from Russia to China that do not have the U.S.'s world view. And so we need as many allies as we possibly can. So I think standing for Israel is in the U.S.'s interest, not only because their values are so similar to ours, but it's also in our strategic interest to do so.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught earlier this hour, but Hamas is flexing to Russia by releasing 2 dual citizens of Israeli and Russian descent or citizenship, just a flex to Putin. So, yeah, we need all the allies we can get.
Absolutely.
Good to see you both, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Harris.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.